XRP is overrated and XCN holders won't like this. This is NC Hammer Crypto. My name is Neil, keeping technical analysis short and sweet. And for the people who have stuck around, shout out to all you guys, subscribers. Look into becoming members and keep this channel running, as I am getting exhausted doing these day after day when the market is moving sideways. But I try to keep you informed, and this is what we see. With Bitcoin, it had its pullback. It held support on that random upward trend line, which essentially this area right here is now showing that we are getting that support. So it is validation. Right in between these two green lines is more or less the fair value gap, the average consolidation price ranging within that area. What we would ideally like to see is it push back up to 92, more than likely get a little resistance before pushing up and trying to close above the previous high around 97,000. However, if some news comes out or some random misalignment, something needs to be pushed down, we could expect this yellow line to play out for Bitcoin, which would essentially move the rest of the market. If we have a liquidity sweep, it's not out of picture. We've seen it happen before, where we were pushing down and then we had a liquidity sweep, one further touch to the low side. You could see that here as well. We have a push down, finding a little bit of support, trying to build higher lows, but it had one more push and acted as if it was going to have a continuation downward from around 54,000 and immediately had a reversal. So either way you look at it, if Bitcoin pulls back a little bit or a lot, it's more than likely the last pullback for the liquidity sweep before taking off, shaking out a lot of people who are new, people who don't know what's going on within the markets, and it can kind of sway people's perspective on what crypto can actually come out to be. For example, going back in history, in November of 2024, we went from roughly 50 cents in XRP up to around nearly $3. So the range, the profit, I was looking at this, and the moment this took off, we saw Bitcoin take off as well. And once Bitcoin started running, I knew altcoins were just about to start taking off. And we see that was about 395%. And it peaked out around almost 500% increase in price for XRP. But if you're in XCN, we'll pull up the XCN chart for the people who just fast forward to the XCN chart. If you're in XCN, you need to be looking at XRP, if not stacking a big bag of XRP as well. Whether you plan to sell it or hold it, XRP is going to be a huge financial gain for everybody who's buying it here around the $2 mark, $1.90. In the upcoming years, we are not going to see the opportunity to enter in at $1.90. And even if you're not selling your XRP, you can expect that it is going to be pushing up nearly $5 before retracing and finding that support around the $3 to $4 mark. When we get that support, it is price discovery, and $5 is not the top. We could expect 10, 15, 25, maybe 100 is, that's kind of pushing it a bit. But we've seen Bitcoin run from $1.90 or roughly $2 to over $100. We can bring that up. Let's go back in history in Bitcoin, back whenever it was $2 of Bitcoin. Insane to think about. There used to be a website where you would just do CAPTCHA verification and get free Bitcoin, 5 free Bitcoin for it. You could do that all day long, and that was back in the day, about a decade and a half ago. Can we go back further? There we go. I don't even know if we have that data on this chart. We might. So Bitcoin, in comparison to XRP, there's 206. We don't have the data. I believe it's on a different chart, but say Bitcoin was at 200 and it ran to 500, had that resistance, but then essentially had a continuation, a big continuation to the upside. So the people who are entering Bitcoin when they had $200 to spend, such as myself, we were just taking this ride up. It hit 800. Everybody was panic selling, trying to push the line back to the 200 EMA, and then it found its support roughly around $600, and from $600 went up to 3,000, and then from 3,000 had a little bit of consolidation for only about a month. Major push up to 5,000, consolidation for about a month, pushed up to 8,000, consolidation for a couple weeks, and then had its continuation. So essentially that's what we are holding out for XRP and XCN. A $2 investment today could be easily worth 200. You guys are buying essentially Apple stock before Apple made iPhone 27 or whatever iPhone they are on. It's very crucial that you guys be stacking some XRP as well as XCN. I am not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice in any way. But for the XRP holders who are watching this video for the first time, definitely like, subscribe, become members, or donate. 50% of everything I make goes to save animals' lives. So you guys can save lives and get better insight on other cryptocurrencies only for members. But I also wanted to bring up, in my previous video, we talked about the red box and more or less what XRP was doing back here in roughly May to August of 2025. So if you're following my cursor back here in this red box, we see we have up here at $2.60, we have the downward trend line. The red box had its rejection, and that was in May 15th, and then it didn't cross that downward trend line until July. May, June, and then July. So about a month, almost 2 months before it crossed that and had a major push up. So here we are, we have, let's say, this red box. 2 months, more or less, from this red box, January, February, maybe by March, we might see a breaking of a downward trend line. And this will play out different than what we saw back here in July of 2025. As this is the initial pump, we will more than likely see that pump, get a little bit of resistance, consolidation, and rejection around that $3.35 to 50 cents. And then once that is broken, we will more than likely know altcoin season is kicking off, and that brings me over to XCN. For the people who are just here for XCN, I know there's a lot of you. Become members. That's what I'm looking for now, so I can feel good about making these videos instead of wasting my time day after day. So XCN, this is just a clean chart, no lines drawn. But when we do have the lines put in, the red downward trend lines, as we've talked about in the previous videos, are more essentially the wedge that we are working within, which is just taking it from more or less this point, drawing downwards, and from this point, drawing downwards as well. The wedge, we can see that we had that rejection off the 200 EMA. It had its pullback, but once this stabilizes, if we can stabilize above the CM guppy, we could get some consolidation. And keeping in mind the RSI, we have the RSI pulled down, and like I've explained many times before, we like to see a W pattern, this push down, whether it's consolidation or a little bit more of a pullback, and then easily pull right back up over the yellow downward line coming. And typically, like we've seen in previous history, this back here in December, for example, we had the pullback, consolidation, another pullback, and then once we crossed over that yellow line, we had the continuation and the overbuying happening for XCN. Let's go back to another example back here. We had a pullback, we had a little bit of a W form right here, but as soon as we crossed over the yellow, we had that major push to the overbought side. So RSI is very healthy if you guys have not used it. Not saying it's completely perfect or accurate in any way, but it's a good indicator to make better judgments. And in my previous video, I had this black downward trend line showing more or less a bull flag for what we are currently looking at, this little bit of a channel. More or less irrelevant. It's not a bull flag. It's pulled back pretty heavily, but this can easily just consolidate, if not push back down a little bit more. But we would expect more or less support off of this upward trend line, which has shown in previous history that it has shown as support and resistance. So we have back here, we have the support. Oh no, I'm lagging out. Right here, this is the support. And back in November 20th, we had a little bit of more support in December, but it broke underneath that, had it as resistance. And then once we broke through that and the downward trend line at the same time, we had that major push up. So we can expect it to either get some support around the 0.0055 if it continues downward within this channel. And the pullback would essentially be what we were looking at with Bitcoin. If you skip the intro to this video, go back to it, and it explains the two options for Bitcoin at the moment. But either option, whether we pull back to this black trend line around 0.005, or we just consolidate slowly trickling out, or consolidate slowly trickling up, we are essentially waiting to see for Bitcoin to build its base and do a little bit of a pump. And we could easily see this push out of this channel, this black downward trend line, have that push up and attempt breaking this red downward trend line again. Once that is broken, I can actually give some pretty good insight on what we can be looking for, but you are going to be wanting to look at your chart consistently once we break out of that red trend line if you are looking to scalp trade. If you are not looking to scalp trade, just hold on for a couple more months and wait to sell. But if you're trying to scalp and get some more XCN to take the bigger ride up, which we all know is to a minimum of 10 cents from 0.006, I would be stacking a bigger bag of XCN at this moment. And you could take that bag that you're stacking at this price range, whether it go down a little bit or finally break that red trend line. If you are stacking within this wedge, you can be selling out of that portion that you are stacking now on the way up while holding your bag that is at a cheaper price at 0.004. Or if you are stuck at 0.01, you could be looking at selling, or 0.16, you could be looking at selling some of your profit and waiting for a better re-entry, because the pullback is only going to benefit you if it is at that high of a price. Say we break the red trend line and the possibilities, the first real resistance is 0.015 more or less, and then 0.02, more than likely some resistance, and then all the way up around 0.03 to 0.031. Those are the real resistance levels on the way up. So if I don't post a video and we just start skyrocketing, don't just be selling because it's at 0.02. The next day can have that continuation and continue to push it up higher. Or for the people who are trying to scalp, you sell at that 0.02, you're re-entering at 0.025, it pulls back to 0.014, and then you just entered into a really risky trade because it did not test support on that red downward trend line. That's essentially what we want to see. But this video has gotten pretty long. Hopefully you guys got some new info from it. Like, subscribe, become members. 50% goes to save animals' lives. And good luck. Have fun with it. I will see you on the next one.